Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
Throughout the echoes of time, across ancient deserts and mighty rivers, the question of the true identity of the Israelites, particularly the ancient Black Israelites, has persisted like a sacred riddle hidden in the sands of history. It is a subject shrouded in mystery, neglected by mainstream narratives, and fiercely debated among historians, theologians, and scholars of antiquity. What if the prevailing image of ancient Israelites has been systematically altered, reinterpreted, or even erased? What if those early children of Israel, those whose names appear in some of the world's oldest scriptures, were not the pale-skinned figures often portrayed in Western iconography, but were instead a dark-skinned, noble people whose descendants have been scattered across continents by conquest, enslavement, and exile? The topic invites deeper questions. Could it be that the Black Israelites, long marginalized and ridiculed for their claims to an ancient royal lineage, once held dominion in corners of the world long forgotten? Is there suppressed historical evidence suggesting that Black Israelites not only existed, but ruled nations, led empires, and contributed mightily to the shaping of early civilization? To seek answers is to embark on a journey through biblical history, ancient African and Middle Eastern civilizations, genetic studies, archaeological records, and oral traditions that span centuries. The result is not just a re-examination of the past, but a resurrection of a history once buried beneath the sands of racial, political, and religious agendas. The origins of the Israelites are deeply rooted in the ancient Near East, where civilizations like Egypt, Canaan, Nubia, and Cush interacted frequently through trade, war, diplomacy, and migration. Biblical texts describe the early Hebrews, descendants of Abraham, as nomadic Semitic people who migrated from Mesopotamia and settled in Canaan. Yet, a closer look at the descriptions in ancient texts and the locations they inhabited reveals that their lineage and appearance may have aligned more closely with Afro-Asiatic peoples. Genesis 10 and Genesis 11 both trace human lineages through figures like Cush and Ham, progenitors of dark-skinned peoples associated with regions in Africa. One of the most overlooked aspects of ancient history is the Afrocentric root of many Near Eastern civilizations. Egypt, known as Kemet, meaning black land, was a cultural and intellectual powerhouse of the ancient world. Ancient Israelites lived and thrived in Egypt for centuries, especially during the time of Joseph and later during the enslavement under Pharaoh. The Hebrews, intermingling with Egyptians for generations, would have shared similar phenotypes. The book of Exodus emphasizes how the infant Moses was raised in Pharaoh's palace and mistaken for an Egyptian, suggesting that his appearance was indistinguishable from that of native Africans. Furthermore, the Hebrew prophets and patriarchs were often described in ways that challenge modern racial constructs. In Lamentations 5 verse 10, the people of Zion say, "Our skin was black like an oven because of the terrible famine," a passage often dismissed or interpreted metaphorically. Yet in context, it may indicate a darker pigmentation consistent with people accustomed to intense sunlight, or possibly even symbolic of their natural skin color heightened by suffering. Other biblical figures, such as Solomon, are described in poetic terms that emphasize dark skin and African beauty. In Song of Solomon 1 verse 5, the Shulamite woman declares, "I am black, but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem," affirming her identity and attractiveness in the face of cultural norms that may have judged skin color differently. As the Israelites established themselves in Canaan and later expanded into kingdoms under Saul, David, and Solomon, their dominion became significant in both military and cultural terms. Under Solomon's reign, the kingdom of Israel reached its greatest extent. The biblical account tells of his marriage alliances with African queens and princesses, including the famed Queen of Sheba. Historical speculation places Sheba in ancient Ethiopia or southern Arabia, both regions historically populated by Black civilizations. The biblical narrative, combined with Ethiopian tradition, claims that Sheba bore Solomon a child, Menelik I, who would become the first emperor of Ethiopia's Solomonic dynasty. This dynasty, which ruled for centuries, is one of the most important legacies connecting Black identity to ancient Israelite royalty. The Solomonic dynasty in Ethiopia is no footnote. Its emperors ruled over a Christian kingdom for nearly 3,000 years, with Haile Selassie being the last recognized descendant of this line. Ethiopia preserved not only the names but the traditions and religious practices that resembled Hebraic customs, including circumcision on the eighth day, dietary laws, the observance of the Sabbath, and Ark of the Covenant narratives. The Kebra Nagast, an Ethiopian holy text, reinforces the belief that the bloodline of Solomon and David continued in Africa, carrying not just royal lineage but divine favor. Even beyond Ethiopia, traces of Black Israelite presence and influence appear in ancient West Africa. The Igbo people of Nigeria, for example, have long claimed descent from Israel. Their customs, such as naming conventions, circumcision rituals, Sabbath observance, and purity laws, strongly resemble those of ancient Israelites. Some scholars have posited that these traditions are not coincidental, but remnants of ancient Jewish communities that migrated following the Assyrian and Babylonian exiles. Genetic studies and oral traditions bolster these claims, although they remain controversial in mainstream academia. In North and East Africa, the Lemba people of Zimbabwe and South Africa also assert Israelite ancestry. Remarkably, modern genetic testing has verified that many Lemba men carry the Cohen modal haplotype, a Y chromosome marker shared by Jewish priests, or Kohanim. This discovery shocked many in the scientific community, reinforcing the idea that communities with African features and Black identity maintained Jewish lineage and practices long before modern Judaism became standardized in Europe. But perhaps the most significant aspect of this historical revelation is how global displacement played a role in erasing the visibility of Black Israelites. After the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE, many Hebrews fled into Africa to escape persecution. Historical texts and maps from the time show large migrations of Hebrews into the Sahel region, Sudan, Mali, and even as far as the Congo. These migrations were followed centuries later by the trans-Saharan and Atlantic slave trades, which targeted many of these African regions heavily populated by descendants of Israel. Could it be that many of the millions of Africans taken as slaves to the Americas were, in fact, dispersed Israelites? The transatlantic slave trade ripped countless people from West and Central Africa and transported them across oceans into captivity. Among them were likely descendants of Hebrew migrants, communities that had retained vestiges of their faith, oral traditions, and identity. It is not accidental that enslaved Africans in the Americas often sang spirituals echoing the stories of Moses, Pharaoh, and deliverance. Their identification with Israel was spiritual, cultural, and perhaps even ancestral. The deliberate rewriting of history during colonial periods, particularly in the 18th and 19th centuries, ensured that these connections would be broken or dismissed. Eurocentric scholarship replaced ancient depictions of Black leaders and Hebrew patriarchs with whitewashed images that aligned with racial hierarchies of the time. Museum pieces, ancient sculptures, and biblical art were reimagined through Renaissance ideals, erasing the African identity of many Near Eastern and Mediterranean peoples. Yet, the truth cannot remain buried forever. The recent resurgence of interest in the Black Israelites and the growing body of evidence, linguistic, archaeological, genetic, and textual, challenges long-standing assumptions about who the ancient Israelites were and where their descendants are today. It is not merely a matter of race or pride. It is a call to historical justice, a demand for acknowledgement, and a reorientation of the global narrative. So, did Black Israelites rule the ancient world? In territories like Egypt, Cush, Ethiopia, Canaan, and parts of Arabia, their presence was deeply embedded. Their royal lineages influenced empires, their traditions helped shape world religions, and their diaspora seeded communities across Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. Although political power may have waned with time, their influence has remained, and in many ways is being rediscovered with new urgency today. To explore this hidden truth is not to rewrite history, but to restore it.